The wine is already in the air when the waitress realizes her hand has betrayed her. A glass tilts too far, too fast. Red liquid arcs violently under chandelier light, a suspended wound, before crashing across the front of a black suit so immaculate it seems to absorb the stain rather than resist it. The splash lands heavy on silk lapel, white shirt, black tie, spreading, blooming, irreversible. For half a second, no one breathes. The Korean man doesn't move. Not when the glass shatters against the table edge. Not when wine drips from his jacket to the white linen like blood finding gravity. His fist remains clenched near the plate, knuckles pale, veins tight. The suit, his most expensive one, the one chosen for tonight, darkens visibly. Silence floods the room. Not the polite kind. The kind that announces danger. A woman seated across from him inhales sharply, fingers flying to her throat. Her chair scrapes the floor as she half rises, eyes wide, mouth open but useless. Around them, conversations die mid-word. Cutlery stops clinking. Somewhere deeper in the restaurant, a laugh begins and then collapses into confusion. The waitress stands frozen. She is black, young, uniform crisp, bottle still clutched in her right hand with the label facing outward like she was taught. Her mouth is open in a soundless apology that hasn't yet found language. Her eyes are locked on the spreading stain, watching the wine ruin a suit she instinctively understands she has no right to touch. The man finally looks up. His gaze doesn't flicker. It settles on her with unsettling precision. She swallows. Sir. His fist comes down on the table. Not a slam. Not rage. A single, controlled strike. The sound snaps through the silence like a warning shot. Plates rattle. A fork tips, then stills. I didn't tell you to speak, he says calmly. The calm is worse than shouting. It presses into the room, heavy and absolute. The woman across from him whispers his name under her breath, fear threaded through the syllables. The waitress feels heat rush to her face, her pulse thudding loud enough to drown out the chandeliers. She forces herself to straighten. I'm sorry, she says anyway, voice tight but steady. It was an accident. He stands. Wine drips from the hem of his jacket, dark and slow. He looks down at himself, assessing damage the way one might examine a cracked watch, already knowing it's beyond repair. Then he looks back at her. You know what this suit costs? He asks. She shakes her head once. No, sir. A faint smile touches his mouth. It doesn't reach his eyes. Good. The woman beside him turns sharply. This is absurd. She's a server. He raises a hand without looking at her. She stops instantly, as if the gesture has weight. The manager appears from nowhere, sweat shining at his temples. Sir, please, allow us to. Not yet, the man says. The waitress feels every eye in the room on her now. She can hear the hum of the lights, the soft clatter of a dropped napkin somewhere behind her. Her fingers tighten around the bottle. I'll pay for it, she says suddenly. The words surprise even her. The manager blinks. The woman gasps softly. A murmur ripples through the surrounding tables. The man studies her. You will? Yes, she says. I don't care how long it takes. He steps closer. The scent of wine and expensive cologne fills her lungs. She can see the fine stitching along the suit seams, the way the fabric catches light even as it's ruined. She doesn't step back. You could work here for 10 years, he says quietly, and it wouldn't matter. I know, she replies. That stops him. Just for a moment. He tilts his head, as if recalibrating. Then why say it? Because it's my mistake, she says. And I won't pretend it didn't happen. Around them, the room waits. People lean forward in their seats without realizing it. This is the moment, everyone feels it, when the story will turn one way or another. The man glances at the stained jacket again. Then at the woman beside him. Then back at the waitress. Come with me, he says. Her stomach drops. The manager stammers, Sir, perhaps a private room. Yes, the man says. A private room. He pauses, eyes still on her. You're not staying out here. The implication hangs in the air, sharp and unanswered. The waitress nods once, because refusing doesn't feel like an option. As they walk, the restaurant seems to shrink around them. Every step echoes. Whispers bloom and die in their wake. The woman follows close behind, heels clicking nervously, eyes darting. Inside the private room, the door closes with a soft, final sound. The chandeliers here are dimmer. The walls thicker. The air heavier. The man removes his jacket slowly, deliberately, folding it once before placing it on the table. The stain is ugly up close, raw, uneven, unmistakable. He doesn't try to clean it. This suit, he says, almost to himself, was chosen for tonight. The waitress stands near the door, hands clasped so tightly her fingers ache. Her heart pounds against her ribs. She says nothing. Outside this room, a decision is forming. She can feel it ticking forward, second by second, like a clock no one else can hear. He looks at her again. By the end of tonight, he says, voice low, controlled, someone will pay for this. He lets the words settle. Now tell me, he continues, why you really spilled the wine. The room goes silent again. And somewhere in that silence, the countdown begins. The door to the private room does not close out the restaurant. The noise seeps through anyway, muted voices, hurried footsteps, the faint clink of glassware trying too hard to sound normal. Outside, the evening has fractured. Tables that once murmured with polite conversation now buzz with restrained urgency. Phones stay face down, but hands hover close to them. Eyes track every movement of staff. Word travels faster than sound. A suit has been ruined. Not just any suit. His suit. People who have never spoken his name aloud suddenly remember stories they heard years ago. Stories that never made the news. Stories that ended quietly. A maitre d' leans toward a sommelier and whispers something that makes the man go pale. A couple near the window abandons their dessert untouched. The humiliation is public now. Inside the private room, the man remains standing, his back to the table, jacket laid out like evidence. He doesn't touch it again. The waitress stays near the door, aware that this thin slab of wood is the only thing separating her from the rest of the world, and that it could open at any moment. You understand, he says, not looking at her, that everyone out there is guessing how this ends. Yes, she answers. They're wondering whether this place will still be open tomorrow. She swallows. I didn't mean to cause a scene. He turns then, slow and deliberate. His gaze sharpens, measuring. Intent doesn't erase impact. The woman who followed them, his companion, carefully dressed, perfectly composed, paces once before stopping. This has gone far enough, she says, forcing confidence into her voice. She's apologized. The restaurant will compensate. He lifts a finger again. She stops. The waitress notices how quickly it works. How absolute. Do you know why places like this exist? He asks the waitress. She hesitates. For people who can afford them. A corner of his mouth lifts. No. For people who need privacy. He gestures toward the walls. Deals happen here. Promises. Threats. Tonight was important. The word lands heavy. Outside, someone knocks softly, then thinks better of it. Footsteps retreat. The waitress feels the weight of unseen eyes pressing through the walls. She imagines the staff clustered together, whispering her name, debating whether she'll be escorted out or carried. She imagines tomorrow's rumors. You spilled wine, he continues, in front of witnesses who understand consequence. I know, she says. Do you? His voice tightens slightly. Because you're standing very calmly for someone whose future may have just collapsed. That is when she realizes she has been holding herself together with effort alone. Her shoulders ache. Her jaw tightens. If I panic, she says carefully, it won't change what already happened. The silence that follows is longer than before. The woman exhales sharply, frustration slipping through her polish. You're enjoying this. He doesn't deny it. I'm assessing, he says. There's a difference. He moves closer to the table, standing beside the ruined jacket. Out there, he adds, they think I'm deciding whether to forgive you. The waitress meets his gaze. Aren't you? He watches her for a long moment. No. Her breath catches. I'm deciding whether you belong to this moment at all. The words confuse her. Before she can ask what he means, the door opens abruptly. The manager slips inside, wringing his hands. Sir, I apologize, but people are leaving. There's concern. We need to reassure. The man turns his head slowly. Leave us. The manager hesitates, glances at the waitress, then retreats without another word. The humiliation deepens. It is no longer just about a spill, it is about who controls the narrative now. The man looks back at her. You've been here how long? 3 months. And before that? She hesitates. Just a fraction too long. His eyes sharpen. Answer the question. Different city, she says. Different restaurant. The woman beside him stiffens, sensing the shift. What kind of restaurant, he asks. The waitress chooses her words with care. The kind where the menus were never the most expensive thing on the table. Something flickers across his face. Recognition? Or irritation? That's vague. It has to be, she replies. Silence stretches again, thick and deliberate. The chandeliers hum softly. Somewhere beyond the walls, a chair scrapes, then stops. The entire building feels like it's holding its breath. You recognize this world, he says finally. That's why you're still standing. She doesn't deny it. That recognition, he continues, is your first mistake. The woman steps forward, anger breaking through her restraint. This is absurd. She's projecting fear onto you. Enough, he snaps. The word cracks like ice. He turns back to the waitress. Tell me something, he says. When the glass slipped, what were you thinking? The image flashes in her mind, the tilt, the flash of red, the certainty that something irreversible was happening. She answers honestly. I was thinking that tonight wasn't as quiet as everyone pretended. His gaze hardens. Meaning? Meaning, she says, that some dinners aren't about food. The admission hangs between them. Outside the room, footsteps approach again. This time, they don't retreat. Voices murmur urgently. Someone knocks, once, firm. The man doesn't turn. They're getting nervous, he says calmly. That's good. Nervous people talk. He looks at the waitress again, studying her as if she's a variable he didn't account for. You didn't just stain a suit, he says. You interrupted a balance. The door handle shifts slightly. Someone tries it. The countdown tightens. He steps closer to her, lowering his voice. If you're here because you recognize danger, he says, then you already know this can't end in the dining room. Her pulse quickens. He glances at the door, then back at her. We're not finished. The door opens. 2 men in dark suits step inside, faces neutral, eyes sharp. The room seems to shrink instantly. The man gestures toward the back hallway. Take her, he says. Not roughly. Not gently. Decisively. And as they move toward her, the waitress realizes the real confrontation is only just beginning. The second private room is smaller. No windows. Thicker walls. A single chandelier dimmed low enough to cast shadows instead of light. The 2 men who escorted the waitress stop just inside the door, then step back without a word. One remains by the entrance. The other positions himself near the wall, hands folded, eyes forward. The door closes. This silence is different from the first. It isn't shared. It's imposed. The Korean man stands near the center of the room, jacket gone now, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal forearms marked by faint scars that don't ask for attention. The ruined suit lies folded on the table behind him like a reminder no one needs repeated. The waitress remains standing. No chair is offered. Seconds pass. Then more. The chandelier hums softly. Somewhere inside the walls, pipes tick as they cool. Every sound feels amplified, as if the room is listening with them. He checks his watch. A deliberate motion. You know what time it is? He asks, without looking up. She hesitates. No. It's late, he says. Late enough that decisions stop being reversible. He lifts his gaze. The look pins her in place. Tonight ends one of two ways, he continues. Quietly. Or memorably. Her mouth goes dry. She resists the urge to speak. He takes 2 slow steps toward her, then stops at a measured distance. Close enough to feel his presence. Far enough to keep control. Silence, he says, almost conversationally, tells me more than answers. So he waits. She waits too, pulse loud in her ears. Her fingers curl into her palms. She focuses on her breathing, on the cool air against her skin, on the faint smell of wine still clinging to her uniform. Minutes stretch. He doesn't move. This is the weapon. Finally, she breaks. You brought me here to scare me, she says. It's working. He nods once. Good. She exhales sharply. Then say what you need to say. He tilts his head. You are impatient. I'm realistic, she replies. The longer this goes on, the worse it gets. A faint smile appears. You're learning. He turns away from her and walks to the table, resting his fingertips briefly on the folded jacket. The stain has darkened as it dries, ugly and undeniable. This suit, he says, was supposed to buy me silence tonight. He looks back at her. Instead, it bought me questions. She shifts her weight, the floor cool beneath her shoes. Questions about me? No, he says. Questions about you. The distinction lands heavy. He circles the table slowly, predator calm. People who belong in rooms like this, he continues, know how to disappear into the background. You didn't. I was doing my job. You were watching, he corrects. Listening. She doesn't deny it. He stops pacing. Why? The question hangs there, sharpened by everything unsaid. Because pretending not to see doesn't make you safe, she answers. He studies her for a long moment, then glances toward the man by the door. How long do we have? 40 minutes, the man replies. The waitress stiffens. A clock she hadn't known was ticking suddenly becomes very real. 40 minutes. For what? She asks. For the other dinner, he says. The one your mistake interrupted. Her chest tightens. You're still meeting them? Yes, he says. And I will not arrive stained. The implication is clear. Something must be resolved before then. He steps closer again. You're standing in a room where people usually sit, he says. That alone tells me you don't understand the imbalance here. She lifts her chin. I understand it. Then act like it, he says softly. The words press down on her, heavy with expectation. She feels the imbalance keenly now, the men, the door, the time, the silence. She is alone in a way that has nothing to do with numbers. I'm not here to challenge you, she says. And yet, he replies, you already have. He turns his back to her and checks his watch again. 38 minutes. Out there, he says, gesturing vaguely toward the restaurant beyond the walls, people are deciding what story to tell about tonight. Stories solidify fast. He faces her. You will be part of that story. She swallows. In what way? That depends, he says, on whether you're a problem or an explanation. The words chill her more than any threat. She thinks of the spill again, not just the accident, but the moment before it. The hesitation. The recognition she hasn't spoken aloud yet. He notices the shift in her expression. There it is, he says. You're holding something back. She shakes her head. I'm protecting myself. From me? From what follows you, she says. Silence slams down hard. The man by the wall shifts his weight. The other straightens slightly. Even the chandelier seems to buzz louder. The Korean man doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. You're making assumptions, he says. I'm making observations, she replies, surprised at her own steadiness. He takes one final step forward, closing the distance until she has to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. Observations can be dangerous, he says quietly. So can denial, she answers. Another pause. This one is shorter. Sharper. He glances at his watch again. 35 minutes. This is how it works now, he says. I ask. You answer. Completely. She nods once. What did you recognize, he asks, when you looked at me tonight? Her heartbeat stutters. The room seems to lean inward. Outside this door, decisions are stacking. Inside it, everything narrows to a single moment. She draws a slow breath. I recognize someone who doesn't need to raise his voice, she says. Because the room does it for him. He studies her face, searching for flattery. Finding none. And why, he asks, voice low, controlled, dangerous. Did that recognition make your hand slip? The question lands like a blade. It is no longer about the wine. No longer about the suit. It is about her. And he waits for her answer. The question hangs between them, sharp enough to cut. The waitress doesn't answer right away. She feels the room before she speaks, the cool air pressing against her skin, the weight of the men by the walls, the low hum of electricity above. She is suddenly aware of how small movements matter here. A breath taken too fast. A word chosen poorly. You want the truth, she says slowly. The man nods once. I don't have time for anything else. She closes her eyes for a brief second, then opens them again. When she speaks, her voice is steadier than she feels. I've worked places like this before, she says. Places that sell quiet. The woman who has followed them stiffens. The men by the walls remain still, but their attention sharpens. Different city, the waitress continues. Different uniforms. Same rules. Same kind of guests who never wait for menus. The man's gaze never leaves her face. I wasn't always a waitress, she adds. That earns a flicker of interest. I started as a runner, she says. Back of house. I learned fast. Learned which tables not to look at. Which conversations to forget before I even heard them. She pauses, swallowing. There was a man there, she continues. Not you. But someone who carried himself the same way. Calm. Polite. Everyone treated him like the room belonged to him. The man's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. One night, she says, a server made a mistake. Spilled a drink. Nothing dramatic. No raised voices. The man smiled. Paid the bill. Left. Her fingers curl tighter into her palms. The server never came back, she finishes. Silence presses down hard. The woman shakes her head. You're implying. I'm telling you what I saw, the waitress says. What I learned. She looks back at the man. So when I saw you tonight, I recognized the pattern. He studies her, expression unreadable. And you think I'm that man? No, she says. I think you're worse. The words land heavy, dangerous. The men by the walls shift, barely perceptible. The countdown ticks louder in her head. Explain, he says quietly. Because that man hid behind chaos, she says. You hide behind control. His eyes narrow. Careful. She nods. I am. She takes a breath, the kind that steadies you before a fall. I recognized you from somewhere else too, she says. The room tightens. Go on, he says. There was a fundraiser, she says. Years ago. Private. Invitation only. I wasn't staff, I was catering overflow. I wasn't supposed to be near the main hall. She glances toward the door, then back at him. I saw you walk in. The woman's breath catches. That's impossible. The waitress doesn't look at her. You were younger, she continues, eyes on the man. Same posture. Same calm. People moved without being asked. He doesn't deny it. That night, she says, someone made a speech about partnerships. About loyalty. About how silence was the most valuable currency in the room. The man's gaze sharpens. And the next week, she says, a business closed. No warning. No explanation. People lost jobs overnight. She lifts her chin. My brother was one of them. The room stills completely. That's your secret, the man says. Not a question. Yes. He exhales slowly, as if considering the weight of it. You think I targeted him, he says. I think you didn't care, she replies. The words tremble at the edge of accusation. The woman steps forward angrily. This is absurd. You're projecting personal tragedy onto. Enough, the man says, sharper this time. The woman freezes. The waitress presses on, emboldened now by the fact that she hasn't been stopped. When I looked at you tonight, she says, I saw someone who decides outcomes without ever seeing faces. Someone who calls it business so he doesn't have to call it responsibility. The man studies her for a long moment. The silence stretches, thick and dangerous. Do you know why I hate accidents? He asks finally. She shakes her head. Because they remove intention, he says. And intention is the only thing I respect. He steps closer, close enough that she can see the faint crease between his brows, the scar near his wrist. You're saying the spill wasn't an accident, he continues. I'm saying, she replies carefully, that fear made me hesitate. And that hesitation ruined my suit, he says. Yes. He nods slowly. Then you agree, you caused this. She doesn't flinch. I accept that. The admission hangs in the air. But, she adds, her voice steady, I didn't cause what it revealed. His eyes flicker. Which is, he asks. That you expect the world to bend quietly, she says. And tonight, it didn't. The room feels suddenly smaller. He checks his watch again. 22 minutes. You've turned a mistake into a confession, he says. She meets his gaze. No. I turned it into a mirror. The words echo. The woman beside him looks between them, tension etched deep into her face. You're accusing him. I'm accusing the moment, the waitress says. Not the man. The man's lips press into a thin line. He studies her as if seeing her for the first time, not as staff, not as a problem, but as a variable he failed to account for. You think, he says slowly, that spilling wine gave you the right to judge me. No, she replies. I think it gave me the responsibility. Silence crashes down again. The men by the walls straighten. The door feels farther away than ever. He steps back, creating distance where there was none. When he speaks again, his voice is calm, but colder now. You believe, he says, that this began with a glass tipping over. She nods. Everyone else does. And you? He asks. She holds his gaze. I believe, she says, that the spill wasn't the beginning. He waits. It was the consequence, she finishes. Of everything you brought into that room before I ever touched the bottle. The accusation lands cleanly. And for the first time that night, the stain on his suit no longer feels like the worst thing that has happened. The accusation hangs in the room longer than anything else has that night. The man doesn't respond immediately. He turns away from her, slow and deliberate, and walks to the table. His fingers brush the folded jacket again, not gently, not angrily. With familiarity. Like touching something that once fit perfectly and no longer does. You think, he says, still facing away, that power is loud. She remains silent. That it announces itself. That it demands obedience through fear alone. He exhales through his nose. That's the story people prefer. It makes the world simpler. He turns back to her. My rule, he continues, has never been chaos. The woman shifts uneasily, sensing a confession but unsure of its shape. I don't punish accidents, he says. I punish disrespect. The waitress studies him. What's the difference? Intention, he replies without hesitation. He gestures to the suit. This wasn't chosen for beauty. Or vanity. It was chosen because of what it means. She glances at the fabric, the cut, the weight, the stain that refuses to disappear. In my world, he says, what you wear to a meeting signals how you intend to treat the people across from you. She says nothing. This suit was respect, he continues. It said I came clean. No weapons. No surprises. Only terms. The room absorbs the weight of that. When it was stained, he says quietly, it told a different story. The waitress feels something shift. The suit isn't just ruined, it's compromised. You think, she says slowly, that what happened embarrassed you. He looks at her sharply. It did. No, she corrects. It exposed you. The men by the walls tense. The woman inhales sharply. The man doesn't interrupt. Because respect that depends on appearance, the waitress continues, is fragile. His gaze doesn't leave her face. You think I don't know that? He asks. I think, she replies, you forget it when things go according to plan. Silence falls again, but it's different now. Less threatening. More contemplative. He glances at his watch. 16 minutes. You mentioned your brother, he says. She stiffens. Yes. You think I remember him, he says. I don't think you remember anyone, she replies. That's the problem. A muscle tightens in his jaw. Not anger. Recognition. You're wrong, he says. I remember faces. Do you remember consequences? She asks. The question lands harder than intended. He turns away again, pacing once. My code, he says, is simple. I don't destroy what I don't need to. I don't create noise without purpose. She listens carefully now. And I never, he adds, pretend innocence where responsibility exists. He stops pacing. Your brother's company, he says, was bleeding money. Corruption at multiple levels. People were going to lose jobs no matter what. Her hands tremble slightly. She forces them still. But, he continues, I chose speed over care. The admission is quiet. Dangerous. I shut it down fast. Clean. Efficient. He meets her gaze. I didn't look back. The room feels colder. That, he says, was my failure. The woman's eyes widen. The men by the walls exchange a brief glance. The waitress doesn't move. You didn't intend to ruin my suit, he continues. But your hesitation was intentional. Yes, she says. And that intention, he says, came from recognition. Yes. He nods slowly. Then we are standing on the same line. She blinks. We are? You acted because you believed I wouldn't see you, he says. That I'd reduce you to the mistake. Her breath catches. And I reacted, he continues, because I believed you were insignificant. The words hang between them, ugly but honest. That, he says, is the truth beneath this stain. She feels the weight of it settle in her chest. He glances at the jacket again. This suit was meant to control a narrative. He looks at her. Now it's part of one. The woman steps forward cautiously. We're running out of time. He checks his watch. 12 minutes. Yes, he says. We are. The countdown tightens, compressing the air. You have forced a choice, he says to the waitress. Whether you intended to or not. She meets his gaze. So have you. A faint smile touches his mouth. Not amused. Respectful. I could make this disappear, he says. You know that. Yes. And yet, he continues, you're still standing. Yes. He nods once, decision forming behind his eyes. The men waiting for me tonight, he says, expect a certain version of me. She waits. They expect certainty. Clean lines. No hesitation. He looks down at his stained suit again. That version no longer exists. The woman's breath catches. You can't be serious. He raises a hand, silencing her. Power, he says, is not proven by doubling down on a mistake. He turns back to the waitress. You wanted responsibility. She nods. Then you'll witness it. He checks his watch one final time. 10 minutes. The meeting is cancelled, he says. The words hit the room like a controlled detonation. The woman stares at him. You can't. I already have, he says. He looks at the waitress, expression unreadable. Tonight, he says, does not end the way I planned. He steps toward the door. My plans, he adds calmly, have changed. The decision doesn't release the tension. It sharpens it. The man doesn't open the door right away. He stands with his hand hovering near the handle, as if weighing the cost of the next motion. Outside, muted voices surge and fall. Someone laughs too loudly, the sound forced, brittle. 10 minutes. The waitress feels it in her chest like a second heartbeat. You cancelled the meeting, the woman says again, disbelief edging toward anger. Do you understand what that signals? Yes, he replies calmly. That I am not desperate. He turns back toward the table instead of leaving, reclaiming the space. The men by the walls do not move, but their posture tightens, as if they sense a shift they don't fully understand. Desperation, he continues, is how mistakes compound. He looks at the waitress. You forced me to slow down. She doesn't answer. You see that as power, he says. No, she replies carefully. I see it as consequence. A faint smile touches his mouth. It fades quickly. This is the second confrontation, he says. The first was about the spill. He steps closer to her. This one is about what happens next. Silence settles again, heavier now because it's intentional on both sides. She feels the weight of the men, the walls, the clock. The room is no longer neutral ground, it belongs to him. She knows that. Yet she hasn't been dismissed. That matters. You think, he says slowly, that by naming my failures, you've gained leverage. She lifts her chin. I think leverage is already there. I just pointed at it. He studies her as if she's a board he hasn't seen before, pieces rearranged mid-game. You're wrong about one thing, he says. What's that? She asks. You believe this confrontation ends with my choice alone. She frowns slightly. It doesn't, he continues. It ends with yours. The words shift the air. The woman steps forward sharply. This is absurd. You're giving her too much. Step back, he says without raising his voice. She freezes. The waitress exhales slowly. What choice? He walks past her, deliberately slow, circling. She turns to keep him in sight. You exposed a weakness, he says. Not because you're brave, but because you were afraid. Yes, she says. Both can be true. Fear, he replies, is only useful if it teaches. He stops in front of her again. So tell me what you've learned. She hesitates, aware that the wrong answer will close doors she didn't know existed. I've learned, she says, that silence protects the powerful more than violence ever could. The men by the walls stiffen. The woman's lips part, then close. And, he presses. And I've learned, she continues, that once silence breaks, it doesn't go back to how it was. He nods slowly. Good. He checks his watch again. 5 minutes. The countdown tightens like a wire drawn too far. Out there, he says, gesturing vaguely, they are already rewriting tonight. Some think you're finished. Others think I've lost control. She swallows. Have you? No, he says. But I've changed direction. He leans in slightly. And change has a cost. She meets his gaze. For who? For both of us, he replies. He straightens. If I walk out of here alone, he says, this ends quietly for you. Fired. Blacklisted. Forgotten. Her chest tightens. She expected that. If you walk out with me, he continues, this becomes something else. The implication coils in her stomach. What kind of something? She asks. A story, he says. One that doesn't stay in this building. She feels the weight of unseen eyes again. Phones. Whispers. Interpretations. I didn't ask for that, she says. No, he agrees. But you invited it. Silence falls again. This time, she uses it. She studies him, not the suit, not the reputation, but the man recalculating in real time. She notices the faint tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flex when he thinks. You want me to validate the change, she says slowly. He watches her closely. You cancel the meeting, she continues. That sends a message. But messages need witnesses. Yes, he says. They do. She exhales. So I become proof. Or a problem, he replies. The room feels smaller. The woman steps forward again, anger now uncontained. You're turning this into theater. No, he says calmly. She already did. He looks at the waitress. You accused me of hiding behind control. Yes. Then stop hiding, he says. Decide. Her pulse hammers. She thinks of her brother. Of the restaurant. Of the door behind her. What happens, she asks, if I refuse? He doesn't hesitate. Then you leave through that door alone. And if I don't? He steps closer, lowering his voice so only she can hear. Then you accept, he says, that tonight follows you. She holds his gaze, heart pounding. The clock in her head hits 0. This is your moment, he says quietly. Walk away, or step into it. He straightens, voice returning to its calm authority. Choose, he says. Or I choose for you. The room feels balanced on a blade. The waitress does not answer immediately. She lets the silence stretch, not out of defiance, but because she understands now that silence is part of the test. The man watches her closely, measuring not just what she might say, but how long she resists saying anything at all. This is not about courage. It is about alignment. Before you choose, he says, voice even, you should understand the shape of the choice I'm offering. She keeps her eyes on his. There is the version that looks merciful, he continues. You walk out alone. Tonight becomes an unfortunate incident. You find work somewhere else. Eventually. Her chest tightens. Survival. And then, he adds, there is the version that looks brave. He steps closer, lowering his voice. You walk out with me. You validate the interruption. You become part of the story people repeat. She swallows. And the cost? He doesn't answer right away. That, he says finally, is where honesty matters. The woman shifts near the wall, arms folded tightly. The men remain statues. Stories, he continues, demand consistency. If you are seen with me tonight, you don't get to pretend later that you were just a waitress. The implication settles heavy in the waitress's stomach. So this isn't a choice, she says quietly. It's a trap. A faint smile appears. All meaningful choices are. She exhales slowly. Then tell me the truth. He raises an eyebrow. Which truth? The one you're not offering, she says. The one where neither option is safe. Silence tightens. You're perceptive, he says. She takes a step forward, surprising herself. If I leave alone, I disappear. If I leave with you, I'm marked. Yes. Either way, she continues, my life changes. Yes. She nods slowly. Then the test isn't about what benefits me. He watches her carefully. Go on. It's about what lets you sleep afterward. The words land with unexpected weight. The woman inhales sharply. One of the men shifts, uncomfortable. You think this is about my conscience, the man says. I think, the waitress replies, that you don't make decisions like this unless it is. He studies her, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in recognition. You want integrity, he says. But integrity is expensive. I know, she replies. He glances at his watch. 2 minutes. You asked why the spill happened, he says. You blamed fear. Yes. But fear wasn't the whole reason, he continues. Her breath catches. There was something else, he says. Something you haven't said. She feels the room close in. You're right, she admits. The words feel heavier than anything she's said so far. When I hesitated, she continues, it wasn't just because I recognized you. He waits. It was because, she says carefully, I recognized myself. The woman's eyes widen slightly. I knew, the waitress continues, that if I kept serving quietly, if I pretended not to see, I would become part of the same machinery. The man doesn't interrupt. My brother didn't lose his job because of one decision, she says. He lost it because everyone around him stayed silent. She lifts her chin. Including me. The room stills completely. That, she says, is the real reason my hand slipped. The confession lands cleanly. The man exhales slowly, the sound controlled but weighted. So the spill, he says, was not fear. No, she replies. It was refusal. The word echoes. The woman steps forward. You're admitting this was intentional? The waitress nods once. Yes. The men by the walls stiffen. The man's gaze sharpens. You staged a challenge. I staged a boundary, she says. Silence stretches, taut and dangerous. That, he says finally, is your fourth secret. She frowns. Fourth? He gestures vaguely. You think I haven't been counting? He steps back, creating space. You feared me. You recognized me. You judged me. And now. He pauses. You confess you acted. She feels exposed, but also strangely lighter. You understand what that means, he says. Yes, she answers. It means you can't pretend this was an accident anymore. And neither can you, he replies. The countdown reaches its final seconds. Somewhere beyond the walls, a phone vibrates. A voice rises, then falls. The man looks at her, expression unreadable. You've passed the test, he says. Her heart jumps. But passing, he adds, does not mean surviving. He turns toward the door, hand resting briefly on the handle. The verdict, he says calmly, is not mine alone. He looks back at her one last time. Wait here. The door opens. Light spills in from the hallway, along with noise, movement, uncertainty. As he steps out, leaving her in the dim room with unanswered consequences, the waitress realizes the most dangerous part is not what he will decide, but who else will be watching when he does. The door closes behind him, and the silence left in its wake is sharper than any threat he's spoken. The waitress stands alone in the dim private room. The chandelier hums faintly overhead. The men who were stationed inside are gone now, their absence louder than their presence ever was. She becomes acutely aware of the space her body occupies, how exposed she is without witnesses, without noise, without movement. Minutes stretch. She does not sit. She does not pace. She waits. Outside, the restaurant erupts, not loudly, not chaotically, but in fragments. Raised voices quickly lowered. Footsteps that stop and start. The sound of a chair scraping too hard, followed by hurried apologies. Something is unfolding, and it is no longer contained. The door opens again. He steps back inside. The man is not alone. Two figures follow him, men whose presence shifts the air immediately. They are not dressed like staff, not dressed like security. They move with practiced economy, eyes scanning, reading the room in seconds. The woman from earlier remains outside. The door closes. This time, it does not feel temporary. The waitress feels her heartbeat spike, then settle into something colder and steadier. This is it. Whatever comes next will not be undone. The man does not look at her right away. He walks to the table, standing beside the ruined suit. One of the men places a phone on the table without a word and steps back. A decision has been made, the man says calmly. The words land with weight. The waitress lifts her chin. About me? He finally looks at her. About power. He picks up the phone, checks the screen, then sets it down face up. Missed calls. Messages stacked on messages. The fallout has already begun. The meeting is officially cancelled, he continues. Not postponed. Not relocated. Cancelled. One of the men nods slightly. That will not be forgiven easily, the waitress says. No, he agrees. It won't. He steps closer, stopping a few feet away. The distance is deliberate, close enough to include her, far enough to remind her where she stands. Tonight, he says, I was supposed to reaffirm control. She waits. Instead, he continues, I demonstrated restraint. The word hangs in the air, heavy and dangerous. You think restraint is weakness, he says. Most people do. She doesn't answer. But restraint, he adds, is what separates authority from panic. He turns slightly, addressing the men behind him as much as her. I could have made this disappear, he says. Quickly. Cleanly. No questions. One of the men's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. I chose not to. The waitress feels the weight of that choice press against her ribs. Because, he says, power that cannot tolerate interruption eventually collapses under it. He looks back at her. You interrupted, he says. Publicly. Yes, she replies. And instead of silencing you, he continues, I listened. The room feels impossibly still. That, he says, is the consequence. One of the men clears his throat softly. There are concerns. I know, the man replies without looking away from the waitress. Some will see this as hesitation. Yes. Others as loss of control. Yes. The man nods once. Let them. The waitress feels something shift, subtle but seismic. This isn't mercy. This is redefinition. What happens to me? She asks. He studies her, eyes sharp but no longer searching. You don't leave with me, he says. Her chest tightens. You also don't leave alone, he continues. Confusion flickers across her face. You will walk out, he says, with your name intact. One of the men stiffens. Sir. I'm aware, the man says calmly. The waitress processes the words slowly. You're not protecting me, she says. No, he replies. I'm protecting the decision. He gestures toward the suit. That stain will be remembered. She glances at it. The dark red against black. Impossible to ignore. And so will the reason it stayed, he adds. He steps back, creating space again. You will not be fired tonight, he says. You will not be escorted out. Her breath catches. You will finish your shift, he continues. In full view. Her eyes widen. You want me back out there? Yes. One of the men looks sharply at him. That's dangerous. So is precedent, the man replies. He meets the waitress's gaze. This is the consequence of refusing silence. Her pulse races. She understands now. This is not protection. This is exposure. They will watch you, he says. They will speculate. Some will test you. She nods slowly. And if someone tries to make an example of me? His eyes harden. They won't. The certainty in his voice is absolute. The man reaches for the suit, lifting it from the table. He holds it for a moment, then sets it back down, not folded this time, but spread, the stain fully visible. This stays, he says. Right here. He turns toward the door. One of the men opens it. Noise spills in, voices, movement, the fragile illusion of normalcy trying to reassemble itself. The man pauses, looking back at her one last time. You wanted responsibility, he says. She meets his gaze, steady despite the storm inside her. Now you have it. He steps out. The door closes. The decision ripples outward immediately. When the waitress steps back into the dining room, conversations stutter and stop. Heads turn. Eyes lock onto her uniform, her face, her hands. The stained suit remains visible through the open doorway. Unhidden. Unresolved. The outcome is set. Nothing about tonight will be erased. And as she takes her place among the tables again, the waitress knows, with a clarity that tightens her chest, that whatever she was before this moment no longer exists. The world has shifted. And it will not shift back. The room does not return to normal. It pretends to. Forks lift. Glasses tilt. Conversations resume in fragments, carefully edited, as if everyone has silently agreed on what not to say. The illusion is fragile. It hums with tension, thin as glass. The waitress feels at the moment she steps fully back onto the floor. Eyes follow her, some openly, some through reflections in polished cutlery and wine glasses. A few people look away too quickly, guilt flickering across their faces. Others stare with open calculation. She can almost hear the questions forming behind their eyes. Why is she still here? Why wasn't she removed? What does this mean? She moves with measured calm, each step deliberate. Her hands are steady now, steadier than they were before the spill. That alone draws attention. Fear would have made her smaller. Control makes her visible. At one table, a man whispers something sharply to his companion. At another, a woman lowers her voice and glances toward the private room where the stained suit still lies in full view. No one misses it. No one can. The stain has become an anchor. The manager intercepts the waitress near the service station, face pale, voice low. Are you okay? She nods once. I'm fine. He hesitates. If you need to. I don't, she says. He searches her face for cracks, finds none, and steps aside. Across the room, the woman who had been seated with him earlier stands near the bar, phone pressed to her ear. Her posture is rigid, controlled, but her eyes flick sharply toward the waitress before she turns away. Anger flickers there. Something else too. Loss. The waitress understands now that consequences move in more than one direction. At a corner table, a man who had been part of the cancelled meeting leans back in his chair, jaw tight, fingers drumming once against the table before stilling. His gaze meets the waitress's for a fraction of a second, measuring, curious, resentful. He looks away first. She moves on. The countdown has ended. Whatever was going to happen tonight has already happened. There is no more waiting. Only aftermath. Near the private room, two men stand quietly, not blocking the doorway, not guarding it either. Their presence is subtle, but unmistakable. No one crosses the threshold. Inside, the suit remains where it was left. Spread. Unhidden. A deliberate refusal to clean up the narrative. The waitress passes by once, not looking at it directly, but feeling its presence like gravity. She understands now what it represents, not shame, not humiliation, but a line that was crossed and not erased. Power has memory. At a nearby table, a woman clears her throat. Excuse me, she says softly. The waitress turns, neutral, professional. Yes, ma'am? The woman hesitates, then lowers her voice further. I just wanted to say, that took courage. The waitress meets her gaze. She does not smile. It took honesty. The woman nods, unsettled by the answer. Not everyone is grateful. At another table, a man snaps his fingers sharply. Service, he says, impatience edged with something sharper. The waitress approaches calmly. You seem very confident for someone who made such a mess, he says, smirking slightly. She sets his glass down gently. The mess is already accounted for. His smile falters. She moves away without waiting for a response. Who benefits, who loses, it becomes clearer by the minute. The staff watch her with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that she is still here. Fear that the rules they thought were fixed have shifted under their feet. The manager moves more carefully now, choosing words, glancing toward the private room more often than before. The patrons divide themselves instinctively. Some lean into the change, emboldened by it. Others retreat, unsettled by the unpredictability. Deals dissolve quietly. Conversations that were meant to happen tonight will not. Outside, engines start. Cars pull away earlier than planned. Some people leave with less than they expected. Others leave with more. Near the end of her shift, the waitress feels a presence beside her before she sees it. The woman from earlier stands close, voice low, controlled. "Do you know what you cost me?" The waitress turns slowly. "I know it wasn't just a suit." The woman's jaw tightens. "You embarrassed him." "No," the waitress replies. "I interrupted him." The woman exhales sharply. "You don't understand what you've done." The waitress holds her gaze. "I understand exactly what I've done." The woman studies her for a long moment, searching for weakness, regret, apology. She finds none. "This won't protect you forever," she says finally. "I don't need forever," the waitress replies. "Just tonight." The woman steps back, something unreadable passing through her eyes. Then she turns and walks away. The final confrontation resolves not with raised voices or threats, but with distance. With things left unsaid. As the evening thins and the restaurant empties, the noise fades into something softer, heavier. The staff begin quiet cleanup. Plates are cleared. Glasses are stacked. The hum of the room lowers. The waitress completes her final table and steps back toward the service station. Her body feels heavy now, the adrenaline finally draining. Her hands tremble slightly for the first time since the spill. She lets them. The manager approaches again, voice gentler this time. "You can go." She nods. Removes her apron. Folds it neatly. As she walks toward the exit, she passes the private room one last time. The door is open now. The suit is gone. Only the faint outline of where it lay remains on the tablecloth, a shadow of a decision that cannot be undone. She steps outside into the cool night air. The city sounds Russian, cars, distant sirens, footsteps. Life continuing, indifferent and immense. She stands there for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of what has passed settle into something quieter. Not relief. Resolution. Behind her, the restaurant doors close softly. Inside, stories will be told. Lines will be drawn. Power will adjust. Outside, she walks away unchanged in posture but permanently altered in position. The night does not applaud. It simply accepts what has happened. And in that quiet acceptance, the waitress understands that some outcomes don't announce themselves loudly. They settle. Heavy. Final. The stain does not wash out. By morning, the restaurant looks unchanged. Tables reset. Glass polished. White linen replaced with fresh cloths pressed into submission. The chandeliers glow as they always have, soft and indulgent, casting light meant to suggest permanence. But something is missing. The room feels larger than it should. The waitress stands outside the staff entrance before her next shift, fingers wrapped around a paper cup gone lukewarm. The city hums around her, delivery trucks, early footsteps, the faint whine of traffic waking up. Nothing in the world appears altered. She knows better. Inside the restaurant, people move differently. They speak more quietly, but not out of fear, out of awareness. The manager nods at her when she enters, not hurried, not nervous. Intentional. He doesn't ask if she's okay this time. He already knows. She ties her apron slowly. The fabric feels lighter than it did the night before. Or maybe she's learned how to carry weight without letting it show. At the table near the back, two men sit where the cancelled meeting was meant to take place. Different faces. Same posture. They glance toward her, then away. Their conversation shifts, lowered, cautious. Power adapts. The stain exists elsewhere now. She heard about it secondhand. The suit didn't make it to the cleaner. It was folded, bagged, and removed, not destroyed, not replaced. Set aside. A reminder kept, not erased. The man does not return to the restaurant that week. Or the next. But his absence is louder than his presence ever was. Deals slow. Invitations change. Certain rooms remain quiet longer than usual. People who relied on certainty find themselves recalibrating. Those who mistook silence for safety grow uneasy. No one mentions the waitress by name. They don't have to. She feels the long-term consequences in subtler ways. A customer hesitates before snapping his fingers. A patron lowers his voice before making a request. A colleague who once avoided eye contact now meets her gaze, steady. None of it feels like victory. It feels like adjustment. On her break, she steps outside and leans against the brick wall, eyes closed, breathing in the city air. She thinks of her brother, not with anger now, but clarity. She understands that what she wanted wasn't justice delivered from above. It was acknowledgement. The stain was never about punishment. It was about interruption. About refusing to let things continue smoothly when smoothness is built on erasure. Weeks later, a rumor reaches her through layers of distance. The man stepped back from a partnership. Quietly. Intentionally. Not enough to dismantle anything, but enough to change the balance. Some call it hesitation. Others call it evolution. She knows better. She knows restraint when she sees it. One night, as she finishes closing duties, she pauses by the table where it all began. The new cloth is pristine. Untouched. Perfect in the way perfection often is, temporary. She runs her fingers lightly along the edge, feeling the texture beneath her skin. The meaning of the stain settles fully then. It was never about ruining something expensive. It was about proving that even the most carefully constructed image can be altered by a moment of refusal. That control is not absolute. That power, when confronted with truth, must either listen or expose itself. She leaves the restaurant quietly, the door closing behind her with the same soft sound it always makes. Outside, the night air wraps around her, familiar and indifferent. No one stops her. No one follows. The city accepts her back without comment. As she walks, she realizes she no longer feels the need to look over her shoulder. Not because danger has vanished, but because she understands where she stands in relation to it. Some stains fade with time. Others change the fabric forever. And the world moves forward, not because everything was fixed, but because something was finally seen. The night does not explain itself. It simply remembers.